Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this edition of 30 on Thursdays, SuskyTech's biweekly webinar series. Jump into some housekeeping before we get into today's topic. Again, this is a biweekly 30-minute series that we do on everything and anything to do with SharePoint. We've been doing it now for about 2 years. We'll cover a lot of great topics. Our next webinar is going to be on advanced taxonomy and searching in SharePoint 2010. That'll be 2 weeks from today on May 2nd at 1:30. You can get the full schedule. We have the schedule built out towards the end of through the end of May. So you can get that at suskeytech.com/webinars. Today's session is being recorded, so if you need to duck out early, it'll be available on our website, as well as if you didn't have a chance to see part 1 of this 2-part series. It's available on our site as well if you go to suskeytech.com/archive-webinars. If you have questions throughout today's session, look to the right-hand side. There's a question window and go to webinar. Please feel free to type those in, or if you have problems with audio, that type of thing. I will be moderating as we go through the topic. If you're interested in more formalized SharePoint training, we do have a couple of classes coming up you may be interested in. One is Nintex Workflow 2010. That is an online class. It's a 2-day class. That's on May 8th and 9th. And then we have a webinar, about a 3-hour training session coming up at the end of May on PowerShell and SharePoint 2010, geared towards developers and SharePoint admins. And you can learn about all of our upcoming online classes at suskeytech.com/online-classes. And if you missed any of those in the past, again, we have a whole slew of 3-hour courses that we put together over the last 6 to 9 months, covering everything from responsive design to InfoPath to developers doing authentication, things like that. So again, you can get those on our website as well. A little plug for our upcoming conference, the SharePointConference.org, which is now in its 6th year. Something we've been doing, pretty happy to have done in the DC area. It's coming up on June 13th and 14th. That's going to be in National Harbor at the Gaylord. And anybody on today's call can use 30T15 and receive 15% off registration. And you can get all the information on that great 2-day conference at SharePointConference.org. So again, talking about today's session, again, it's a 2-part of our series called Security and Compliance. The first part, and I'll cover, if you missed part 1, I'll cover a snapshot of that in a second. But this is part 2, Managing Security and Compliance in SharePoint. And our presenter today is Marc Dreyfus. He's Risk Management Compliance Specialist at AvePoint. I will be your moderator. I'll be managing the controls of the questions and everything else. I'm the Director of Product and Training here at Protiviti/SuskyTech. So again, real quick recap of part 1. Part 1 was what I would say a high-level view of security, compliance, and information management as it applies to the enterprise. So we take it from that 30,000-foot view of security and information management and privacy and all of those things, and really risk management. And then we kind of boil it down in this part 2. What Marc's going to cover is how that applies and is directly applicable to SharePoint. So again, if you missed part 1, you can get it in its entirety out on our website. But part 1 was really, I would say, the enterprise or 30,000-foot view of the topic. And part 2, which is today, is the SharePoint view of it. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn control over to Marc. All right, Marc, you should have control.
Yep, give me a second. It's just loading up on my system here. Okay, show my screen. Okay,
Perfect.
you see that? Okay, great.
Yep.
So, hi, this is Marc, everyone. Thanks for joining. So, at AvePoint, I'm responsible for introducing companies to technology-assisted approaches to risk management, as well as sharing compliance strategies being employed by our SharePoint customers today. Generally, the people I speak with are typically concerned with the sensitivity of data within their environment and hold some of the responsibility of avoiding data breaches when possible and reporting on them if and when they do occur. So very briefly, a little background on my company. So AvePoint is Microsoft's largest SharePoint ISV. We've been offering infrastructure management solutions for SharePoint since 2001. We have end-to-end tools for managing the lifecycle of SharePoint data from birth to retirement. And all of this is built on an extensible .NET architecture, which has subsequently allowed us to bring enterprise solutions to our customers such as SharePoint governance and compliance. We are also a depth managed partner with true 24/7 follow the sun support. So today, technologies are enabling us to do more with electronic data. Some examples are mining across huge data sets, the ability to finally do effective user profiling, giving more users the ability to participate as content creators. And with this, we are experiencing an ever-expanding set of requirements for securing that data. And these requirements may be mandated from a third-party authority, or it could be imposed as part of an organizational or organization's internal controls. So here are just a few of the regulations and mandates that apply to companies across industries. Now, I ran out of room in this slide, but hopefully this gives you a sense of the mounting regulation. The takeaway from this is, and without having to know all of them, is ultimately it boils down to a simple idea, that information should be available to those who need it and protected from people who should not. Now, the best way to secure a system like SharePoint is just to shut it down. And although I'm guessing that some of you may wish to do this every now and then, this is not really an option, right? So what strategies can we employ to create the most open system for our users and the most secure systems for our data? As SharePoint grows into an enterprise application, the same qualities that are driving adoption, like flexibility and user administration, those qualities are also driving the need for greater oversight as well. And companies are faced with this balancing act between the need to collaborate and the need for security. So we believe at AvePoint that compliance is a continuous process that includes internal communication, policy management, training, and technology. And all of those components are necessary for a successful approach. And trying to do each alone creates an unnecessary burden on auditors, and your legal counsel, on technology managers, and other stakeholders. So without this combination, we find that companies are not fully aware of their risk posture and tend to employ a bit of denial as part of their strategy. This issue of risk awareness, this issue of risk ignorance, right, but what's below the water, is usually what causes a significant data breach. And it's much easier to lock down sensitive information when we know it's there, but it's the information we are unaware of that usually becomes a problem. So as you can see here, this is a quote from the captain of the Titanic before they took the maiden voyage that sunk the ship. And he says, "Never in all history have we harnessed such formidable technology. Every scientific advancement known to man has been incorporated into its design. The operation controls are sound and foolproof. But in truth, it is extremely difficult to identify and remove risk from a collaborative system." So when I ask clients how they know if there is sensitive data in SharePoint, most of the time, the honest answer is they don't. And when I hear that they do, it is either because they have a technology-assisted solution in place or because they are invoking some denial about the behavior of users in the collaborative system. So where are these breaches occurring? So I believe companies know this intuitively, but here's some data to back up that intuition. If you look at the second column, 61% of managers polled in the study felt they had a significant risk for data breach from an accidental action of an employee. And even if we don't focus on hacking and malicious behavior from outside our organization, there's plenty to do here. If you review breaches that have been reported to the FTC or Federal Health and Human Services, you'll see a consistent trend of breaches caused by internal accidents. And this is starting to get very expensive. And right now, companies are affected by this through fines, but we are even seeing litigation and tort cases coming to bear on these breaches and these issues. So our approach to addressing these challenges is the following. Policy enforces compliance, and the tools enforce the policy. So how do we do this? So essentially, Susky would take the rules laid out in your policy, combine them with some of the out-of-the-box conditions we have pre-written for you, and create a test scan that we crawl across all or part of your SharePoint farms. These scans will be customized to your specific environment with help from Susky, and each condition or check can be a pattern, like a social security number, or a plain text string like internal only or restricted, something like that. And checks can be used in combination, and we can also look for their reoccurrence in a document. And this flexibility allows the scanner to be fine-tuned to remove false positives from the resulting data. And the scanner also has an intelligent user-defined scoring system, so documents scanned can also be ranked by risk level. So there are two types of scans. There's a real-time scan and a scheduled scan. Now the scheduled scan looks at the risk posture of the system at a single point in time and is using for building reports of the system in its current state. Now once a report is built, the user can drill down into the specifics of a violation for forensics analysis, including where the document is located, when the document was accessed, and who was working with the file. The reports from the scheduled scanner can also be compared to historical data for trending analysis. Now, a real-time scan is set up to review and act on changes as they occur in the data repository. And several immediate actions can be taken on a document at the moment a violation appears in a new or changed document. So that means that once someone publishes that document or makes a change in the document that violates the policy, an action can take place. Now those actions include the ability to move a document, to delete a document, to quarantine a document, or to secure the document in place by stripping and changing the SharePoint permissions. We can also classify that document with a tag. We can embed the tag in the document itself or add a metadata tag to SharePoint. And those actions can all be invoked as well with the scheduled scanner. Okay, so to give you an idea of what this looks like, here is a Compliance Guardian dashboard. Now this is a screenshot, so I apologize if there's if it's harder to see. But this is the actual tool, and this is a picture from my system that I have. So you give this dashboard to a compliance stakeholder, and you can customize this dashboard to look at a filtered view of only the policies and scopes that are relevant to that user. And you can distribute dashboards with different policies and data sets to relevant compliance people in your organization, keeping the access to control to the data also secure through this platform as well as through the system. So this is one of our trend reports, and this looks at how the system is doing over a period of time. Now that period of time can be selected by the user. And essentially, I've been asked this a lot, so I'll just say this, that the amount of summary data that you keep in the system can be modified by the administrator. So you can keep as much data as you like historically, or you can purge that data. So this is a violation trend report that dissects potential risk to each condition within the policy you want to enforce. One of the other things I wanted to show you, because I think a lot of our customers are very interested in this functionality, is that since we can tag documents with a security tag, and as you can see here we have which is name value pair. We just picked violation tag and we decided to do sensitive, private, or public. As soon as that document's published, the security tag's applied. But if I'm an end user given permission by the administrator to modify that tag, I would click on my Compliance Guardian Tag Manager, and I can go ahead and change that I can change that value. So in this case, I'm changing that value from sensitive to restricted. However, if I wanted to change that value from sensitive to not sensitive or public, what the system can do is it can make a choice for you based on how you set it. You can tell the system to override the end user and stick with the automated policy. You can give the user override control over the system, or you can identify it as a conflict, quarantine the document, send notification out, and say, hey, we're going to go ahead and review this document. We're going to bring the people in who need to review it before you post it in the system to add risk to that system overall. And we've gotten a lot of good feedback from this, because a lot of our customers ultimately want to give more control to the line of business to make decisions on the sensitivity of the document. So this idea of trust and verify, where the user can go ahead and keep their current behavior, but we want to go in after that user and go ahead and make sure, verify that they're following the policy, is one way that you can implement the system. So the Compliance Guardian, this is a little bit technical, this slide, but there's a point to this. The Compliance Guardian software is modular, and it's divided into 3 tasks, including the content scanner, which is responsible for crawling through the data repository, the compliance engine, which compares the content source to the relevant policy, and the reporting engine, which compiles and presents the reports. So I'm showing you this modular architecture because it allows AvePoint to adapt the scanner to other content sources, such as websites, file shares, social applications. I mean, essentially any product with an open API that we can call. So unlike the Doc app portfolio of tools, Compliance Guardian takes a reasonable effort to configure. And we found that a lot of customers looking at DLP or other risk management solutions were frustrated with the reporting results. The result sets that they were getting included too many false positives to make the data valuable to the organization. The AvePoint Compliance Guardian combines a multi-layered scoring system with a best practice approach to implementing the software, giving our customers practical information that can be quickly compiled for reporting and is actionable. As part of a successful rollout of this solution, AvePoint and our partners would follow an assessment process which includes, well, first gathering the requirements, completing the scan engine test conditions, running through the scenario, analyzing the results, fine-tuning the system, and then running the scenario again. And each iteration would be backed by analysis and mitigation recommendations. So this process can be part of a one-time assessment or the first step in successfully running the software continually. And we recommend that customers follow this or a similar process when acquiring compliance software. And you can get more information about this from SuskyTech. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Steve for questions.
Okay, great. I do have a couple of questions maybe to get things started based on kind of what we did in part 1, Mark, and part of that is where I think goes back to your slide that talks about really assessing if you maybe in a little bit in that denial or risk ignorance category. With the tool the way you have it and Compliance Guardian, can you use this effectively for audits and basically just do an assessment of kind of where you are, or do you need to kind of have an idea of what your processes are first, so you can kind of map it immediately from here's where everything is, and then here's it against these different things,
right? So
scenarios.
It's a good question. So customers that we've spoken with. They're all at very different parts of of their policy maturity level. So when you think about, where are they in designing the process around making sure that they have compliance within the organization, we have customers that some of them are starting from scratch, some of them are already at the very far side of the maturity curve. So for those customers that already have a policy in place, it's really just a matter of mapping that policy to a risk engine. But for those companies that don't already have a policy in place or those internal controls, a lot of times there's an effort that you need to take, which is to say, well, what exactly do you see as risk, and how do you want to manage that risk? Because truthfully, you can, risk is somewhat interpretive. It's somewhat up to in the eye of the beholder.
And along those lines, if I think back to one of your other slides, so can you do an analysis again, say at your SharePoint environment, say you have an SharePoint environment and you just want to go in and assess where it fits to maybe an industry standard, whether it's 508 compliance or HIPAA or anything else. Do you kind of have those in there built out, or?
Yeah, yes. Okay, so I understand your question now. So yeah, so one of the things that we offer with this are these out-of-the-box templates, and they go across most of the regulatory statutes that are out today and are relevant to companies. So what we do is we'll give you a template that would be for, let's say, personally identifiable information, PII, or PCI, or Graham-Leach-Bliley, or one of these regulatory statutes that's out. And now you can run it out of the box, but you'll probably get a lot of false positives. So we'll get you 90% of the way there, and then you can take our templates to essentially build out the scanner in context to the environment that you have.
Okay, great. And one other question. Relating to, you talked about, I think it was on your previous slide, that the way that Compliance Guardian works and basically putting the process and procedures in place, you can look at things outside of SharePoint, right? I think you mentioned Yammer and maybe file shares in the file system. Can you talk about that a little bit in terms of how that works?
Yeah, so this is the third iteration of our product, and we made a substantial investment in really rethinking how we were going to bring this to market. So we actually redesigned the system so that it would be extensible and expandable outside of just SharePoint. But because we have a full architecture for SharePoint infrastructure management, we started by focusing on SharePoint as the first repository. Now today, you could essentially access file systems through a connector to SharePoint. But in our Service Pack 1, our plan is to then provide you a direct access to file shares, to websites, and we're actually looking for our customers to tell us where they want to go next, whether it's ERP systems or some other repository that they want us to connect to. Essentially, because we have an open API with the scanner, we could really scan through any repository that gives us access.
And does that include like Office 365, SharePoint Online?
Yeah, so actually we have customers who are talking to us about this, because there's some interesting jurisdiction issues when you start going into the cloud, right? Which is, you might fall under a state regulation, federal regulation, but when you start putting information in the cloud, then the question is, where is that server being held? Where's my data, and what jurisdiction is over that data? So we actually, today, not only can we run this thing with data that's being shared in the cloud, but we can actually prepare companies to take data that they have today, profile it, categorize it, make sure that they tag it with a specific jurisdiction, so when they do move it to the cloud, they're sure that they know where that data needs to reside, whether it's from a national standpoint or even from a state and local standpoint.
And I mean, so let me ask the question a little differently too. So is there a version that runs in Office 365, or can you at least access, if you're running a hybrid environment, maybe you have an on-prem SharePoint, but you're also putting stuff out in Office 365, can you run the reports and use the Office 365 as a data source?
The answer is yes. I have not tried it myself, but just generally to let you know, I mean, AvePoint is, we're working very closely with Microsoft to make sure that you can use all of our tools with their cloud services. So we have this across the board. However, for Compliance Guardian, that might be part of one of our cumulative updates that's coming out very soon.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm going to look to the question window. I don't see any other questions. Mark, I'll give it another couple seconds, see if anybody has anything.
Okay.
And if not, Mark's contact information is on the screen as well as mine. So if you have any questions after the fact, you want to reach out to Mark or myself, our information is up there. And again, our next session, we'll get into search and maximizing taxonomy is in 2 weeks on May 2nd. And with that, I'd like to thank Mark for his time this afternoon and walking us through compliance guarding and talking about security and compliance and those type of things within SharePoint.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Mark.